When I was a kid, I was lonely a lot. I grew up an only child, family of immigrants. It's not that I didn't have friends, but I had trouble connecting. The first thing I received when we immigrated from Italy to the United States was a Super Nintendo. And I'll never forget this night because we were playing Super Mario World and I didn't speak English. The only connection that I was able to have with my cousins and second cousins who spoke fluent English and who had lived here their whole lives was this Italian plumber on a screen and the bright greens and browns of 1-1, the Super Mario World where you first meet Yoshi. The Super Nintendo changed my life. And while I did have other pursuits and, it was my mother who pushed me into going into the arts in 6th grade because I was sitting there playing Final Fantasy VIII and she was like, you've got to get out of the house. I can't have you be in the house doing nothing all day. And so she forced me to go to theater school and theater camp. And I remember being like, this is not a place I want to be. I want to be at home. I remember it was like Fisherman's Horizon area in Final Fantasy VIII. And it was interesting because that is the corner where my life changed. I remember at the time I was also really big into Pokemon and Digimon especially. And I had this desire to be an actor, to be a voice actor. And I remember sitting with my mom and having her ask me, okay, well, what'd you sound like if you were screaming or whatever? And anyway, besides the point, the point here is that my entire childhood is video games. The strongest memories I have from infancy, from childhood, are memories of video games. There was a period of time where I thought that was really kind of sad, that for other people it's spending time watching sports or going on adventures or hiking or whatever, and for me it was truly sitting around and discovering story and reading and being immersed in music. Final Fantasy VII's music in particular, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy VII these days, simply because I did everything I possibly wanted to do in that game and I've really very little desire to re-experience it. But that music and Nobuo Uematsu and Koji Kondo, these guys changed my life. So what is the point of that? The point of that is that video game music has evolved in so many different ways. There is so much more to video game music than there was 30 years ago, which is madness. You can hop onto Persona and you hear acid jazz, or you hop into Genshin and you hear orchestral music, or you listen to Sumeru or Natlan and you're getting like musical representation of cultures you may never even know, or cultures you're not aware of, and so you're exposed to a new world. Or you're playing Halo and feeling the feeling of loss and defeat as you're fighting for your life. I used to think that games were games, and the gameplay was really the thing that really stood out to me. But as time has gone on, I find myself always gravitating more towards the musical and artistic experience of playing a video game. Gameplay, of course, is always going to be the most important part. Music that's written for games is always written for the sake of telling a story and enhancing a story. And without that music, what do we have? I mean, we have a very nice experience that feels somewhat shallow. So because of Nobuo Uematsu, I decided to go into music subconsciously. Now, it wasn't like, oh, Uematsu-san, you're the reason I love music. No, it wasn't like that. It was like, oh, I've been exposed to the rich sound quality, the MIDI sound quality, the orchestral MIDI experience of playing through the Final Fantasy series. Of course, I'm going to go into music because it naturally just connected me to that part, that storytelling aspect of who I am intrinsically. And so when people are like, I turn off the music in game, or music in games isn't as deep as the classical world, I get kind of incensed. And it's like, live your life. Who cares what you choose to do? But the reality is that music is everything. It is a fundamental part of the experience. And while you may be connecting to music passively, imagine if you're able to engage in it through the video game storytelling experience, and how meaningful that could be for your life in small microcosmic ways, like just paying attention a little bit better, or in enormous ways, like going to school for music, picking up the piano because you love I don't know, some random piece that you heard on a video game and you're like, oh, I'm 45 years old. Now is as good a time as any to pick up the piano. And I think that that's also something that we need to talk about. Music is a vessel for truth, for love, and for expression. And so sometimes people come on the channel, they leave comments that are really just self-projecting onto the fact that things can be challenging for people, and they want to feel that their music is being represented and they feel validated by listening to their music. But it's actually deeper than that, because you having that experience with that music is more important than whether or not it's featured on a channel like this. You connecting to, feeling, and being moved by music is an enormous and powerful thing. And I kind of wanted to just talk in circles about this, because I feel like we dismiss it. And very, very infrequently is sound, music, and voice brought up. And one of my favorite YouTubers, ACG, always has had a section about the power of music and how the music changes the experience. Because what I do on this channel is not special. Anybody can feel and connect to music more deeply through active listening, through really fine-tuning and focusing in on the things about a piece of music that move them. You can isolate your ears. You can hear the bass. You can hear the flutes up top. You may not know what the instrument names are, but you can be like, oh, the higher instrument up here, that's really bright. That makes me feel XYZ. Music challenges us and requires us to connect to ourselves and connect to an experience we're watching and experiencing on the screen. And that is really the crux of all of it, is embracing music as a vital component of the storytelling and gameplay experience. Because without it, I really don't think you have the experience that you think you might have. You may love the gameplay, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of games where it's like, oh, quiet moment, how nice. But in general, music changes everything. And music changed my life, because when I was 7, I received a Super Nintendo for the first time. And I woke up. I woke up to the magical sounds of music and how that can transport me to a bright, a scary, a funny, a silly, a sad, and all sorts of different emotion place. And that's the video. Sometimes you just have to say what you feel and feel what you say. Stay tuned to the channel for more. See you later.